I'm excited about this interview. You're going to learn a lot about the history of the Cleveland Browns. But before I get into that, got to thank my sponsor, DraftKings. Hey, everybody. It's great having football back, and it's also a perfect time to dive into the action with my partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $250 in bonus bets plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Now, that's something I can toast some tea to. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code WORSTTAKE. The crown is yours. Again, that's $250 in bonus bets instantly in 1 month of NFL Plus Premium after betting just $5. Stay in on the action and use your $250 in bonus bets on anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. DraftKings is the best place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have a shot to win cash prizes. New customers, use my promo code WORSTTAKE. Bet just $5 on any wager and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code WORSTTAKE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. So, disclaimer, in this video, there's going to be some audio issues that pop up, but I decided to keep those audio issues in because the person we have in here, Barry Shuck, is just such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the history of the Cleveland Browns and the things that we're talking about that I think it's just important to try not to cut out any words that were in there. So this is going to be a little bit more of an uncut version of that interview, but I think it has a ton of knowledge. I learned stuff during this interview. So if you're anybody who cares or wants to learn more about the history of the Cleveland Browns, make sure you check out Barry Shuck on Dogs by Nature and check out his work that he's done. He does a great job of doing it, but also check out this interview. I think this is a great gateway to learn a lot, especially if you're a younger fan or a fan that's my age or around my age that, didn't really go through the Browns moving. I think this would be a good video to watch and share. So please check it out. Bear through the audio issues. I think the information that's in it is well worth it. Y'all have a great day. One of the things I have noticed over the years of doing this is that we're starting to get a generation of Browns fans, not just in the stadium, but now they're starting to get to the age where, they are getting into the media. They're starting to cover these things. And these Browns fans are unique because they grew up post Browns move. Like, they don't know a world where the Browns aren't a team recovering from expansion, where the Ravens aren't the Ravens. And I've seen that lead to a lot of misinformation or just like a lot of confusion about what happened between the city of Cleveland, Art Modell, the city of Baltimore, that ended up with the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns as we know it today. So what I wanted to do is bring on somebody who I read an excellent article about the subject on to kind of talk about that with. And Barry is the man that I found who wrote that article. Barry, I'm happy to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Quincy. I just want to remind everybody that school's in session now. So if you're driving through neighborhoods, let's slow that down a little bit. We don't want to see you on the news running over somebody's kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Drive safely out there. Make sure you pay attention to pedestrians. So for a lot of, like, when you look around, when you hear people talk about what happened in 95, like I think the big clip that went viral recently was Chris Canty was talking about the Browns moved in 95 because there was no fan support for the team. And that's why they had to move. Like, how do you address that kind? Because that feels like that comes from, because Chris Canty's a former, not Raiders, but Ravens player. So it feels like it comes from the Art Modell side of things. And how do you parse out, like, whose side of the story is what and how you get that information from back then?
Well, there was a lot of moving parts to why the Browns moved. And actually, Quincy, the Browns moving to Baltimore actually began in California and in Canada. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, so the NFL owners, they have meetings several times a year. We all know that. Anything minor is solved here, but anything major is discussed, tabled, researched, then brought up for a vote. It took three-quarters approval votes from owners for anything major to pass. And that's been the case since the league began in 1920. Well, around 1980, Al Davis, owner of the Oakland Raiders, wanted the city of Oakland to do some renovations on his stadium that was built in 1966. Specifically, he wanted skyboxes installed and he wanted renovations done. You know, Quincy, when you buy a Browns hat or you buy a Browns jacket, that profit is split 32 ways.
Hmm.
But inside your own stadium, teams don't share uh, proceeds, proceeds from parking, concessions, advertising in the stadium, all that is kept by the team. You know, if a local tire store is the official tire store of the Cleveland Browns and paid to be named that, the Browns keep the profits and not the league. Skyboxes can bring 250,000 at the time a unit. If you got 125 new skyboxes, Quincy, that's a lot of coin.
Hmm.
Well, Oakland Coliseum was old. It was not well maintained. Parking was minimal. Traffic was bad. Al Davis unsuccessfully got the city to do any stadium renovations. So the Los Angeles Rams had just moved out of the Coliseum and relocated to Anaheim, and that left the stadium open. Al Davis wanted to move the Raiders to Oakland from Oakland to Los Angeles. When that came before a vote, it was 22 to nothing against the Raiders moving. When what Al Davis did, he moved them anyway. The Los Angeles Coliseum had an antitrust lawsuit against the NFL. Davis just piggybacked that suit. In the end, Al Davis won $50 million in 1982, and the Raiders became the Los Angeles Raiders. Well, Quincy, after they paid Al Davis $50 million, the last thing the league wanted to do was for other teams to do the same thing. So, not wanting every team in the league to sue, the NFL owners came up with a new bylaw that now, instead of needing three-quarters of a vote for a team to want to relocate, they could do whatever they wanted to with their own franchise. Well, all across the NFL, there were teams that were not happy with their stadiums, their
Mm.
stadium deals, the management of their stadiums. You know, teams having to take a back seat to the baseball team. You know, the Browns shared the stadium with the Indians, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and so what this did is this opened up the door for teams to be able to move on their own without having anybody in the league um, make up their mind or vote. Well, just like the Haslams are talking about Brook Park today, well, during that time, Art Modell paid $800,000 for 190 acres of farmland in Strongsville in
Mm.
1993. I mean, excuse me, 1973. He had the idea that he build a stadium there. Are you aware of that?
No, I did not know that. That's interesting.
So what Modell wanted to do was move the team out of downtown Cleveland. Eventually, he never built there, and the property eventually became residential home lots. But as early as 1973, Modell was already thinking about leaving downtown Cleveland. But what happened after Al Davis is a lawsuit, other NFL clubs bolted their city. In 1984, the Baltimore Colts moved to Indianapolis. The Houston Oilers became the Tennessee Titans.
Mm.
In 1980, the St. Louis Cardinals made Phoenix their new, saying, screw the NFL. Well, in 1985, Cleveland proposed a dome stadium for downtown. It was going to be called the Hexatron. and was hexagon shaped with a retractable roof. Governor Dick Celeste gave his support and proposed funding based on entertainment and user tax. The
Hmm.
dome would be home to both the Browns and the Indians. Well, when it was Quincy, when it was brought in front of the voters, it was defeated by a 2-1 margin. So that, well, with the Colts gone, now Baltimore was without a pro football team.
Mm.
Well, there were 1991. The NFL announced they were going to begin play in 1994. There were 11 cities that applied, and they whittled that list down to 5 cities: St. Louis, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Charlotte, and Memphis. Well, meanwhile, the Canadian Football League decided to expand into the United States. They put a team in Baltimore, which became the Baltimore Stallions, and they played 2 seasons. Well, both years the Stallions went to the Grey Cup and won it in 1995. Crowds were good. Baltimore had pro football again. Um, and when the NFL expansion came up, it assumed that Charlotte was a lock. According
Mm.
to all the research, the next one should come down to either St. Louis or Baltimore. Now, Quincy, St. Louis had the Rams and Baltimore had the Colts, correct?
Yeah.
So they were both former NFL cities. Well, the Baltimore group had already named their team, and they were going to be called the Baltimore Bombers. World War II, Baltimore was famous for having built the B-52 bombers. The plant was located there. Well, former Browns GM Ernie Accorsi had the opportunity to work with the governor of Maryland
Mm.
about Baltimore getting that expansion team. Well, Accorsi had been the GM at Cleveland. He resigned in 1992 and then went in Cleveland. In 2021, I interviewed Corsi and I asked him about the Baltimore gig. And let me read you what he said. Um, Let me pull this up real quick. I said in 1992, he had grown up in Baltimore, and he had been the GM of the Baltimore Colts for a few years. He's the one that drafted John Elway. Here's the question: You resigned from the Browns in 1992. Uh, were there just too many Chiefs in the building with head coach Bill Belichick and player director Mike Lombardi? He said, I had been away from Baltimore for 9 years and I wanted to get back east. Secondly, I got the opportunity to work with the governor of Maryland about Baltimore getting an expansion team. The NFL was going to expand to 2 markets, and all my research looked like it was Baltimore and Charlotte were going to be the favorites. He said, I had a good opportunity if they got a team that I'd be the next general manager.
Mm.
Well, there's the tie between Cleveland and Baltimore. Of course, he had worked for the Browns. He knew about Modell not being happy with old Cleveland Municipal Stadium. It was run down. It was built in 1931. He wanted lots of renovations made, and the city was him hauling around and not doing anything about it. Meanwhile, the Stallions, the CFL team, was wildly successful, yet the team could not wait to replace them. When Charlotte was announced as the first city, uh, in a couple of days, Jacksonville was declared the second city, and that sent shockwaves
Mm.
across Baltimore, who thought that they were going to be the winner. Um, and what this did is once the city of Baltimore was stiffed by the league for the expansion team, The city of Baltimore began a search of existing NFL teams to see if any of them weren't satisfied with where they were or if they had stadium issues. All of that was Art Modell, Quincy. Um, they came up with a project called the Gateway Project, which began in May of 1990, with a sin tax on alcohol and cigarettes. Out of the sin tax, they were able to build the Cavaliers a new arena, and then they built the Indians a new stadium. Do you remember when either one of these were built?
Well, it was like the mid '90s, mid to early
Yeah, mid
'90s.
yeah, early 90s.
Yeah.
So both of those teams got stadium with tax money that the voters had voted on and passed. Um, Next up was supposed to be the Browns, and that just stalled. It
Mm,
just went on, and Modell was getting antsy about that. He had a company called Municipal Stadium Corp, and it ran Municipal Stadium. When you went to see Bob Seger or the Rolling Stones in the 1980s, it was Stadium Corp who booked the act and gained the profits. Tractor pulls, motorcycle races, hockey games, concerts, they were all paid by Stadium Corp, and Stadium Corp made the profits, which is Art Modell. But when the Indians left for Jacobs Field, Modell was instantly stuck with 82 open dates
mm,
from what was the Indians and no tenant. In their new stadium, the Indians would go out and sell out 455 straight games at Jacobs Field. So Modell was deep into talks with the city of Cleveland of either spending millions on rent of old Muni Stadium or building a new one. And that drug on and on. Um, the same syntax came up for a vote, which the with the Browns as well, and did pass. But Modell wanted control over the stadium like he had before, and the city of Cleveland said no. He would be simply a tenant. In the meanwhile, the city of Baltimore began to have discussions with Modell. They talked about building a new stadium complete with luxury skyboxes for the Brown, which is what Modell wanted anyway, and other numerous financial aspects that would swing Modell's way. Um, in 1994, the Browns had Bill Belichick as head coach. Do you remember that?
oh yeah.
1994, the Browns went 11-5. They went to the playoffs and beat New England.
Hmm.
The next year in Sports Illustrated, in the Pro Football Preview issue, SI predicted the Browns would face the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. The Cowboys then had Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and that bunch. In 95, they started 3-1, and then the rumors started to surface about the Browns possibly moving. Each week, the rumors, Quincy, just got louder and louder. I've interviewed 7 players from that 1995 team, like Dave Logan, Matt Stover, Reggie Langhorne, Brian Brennan, and Anthony Griggs. And what they remember about the night when my questions would go to the 95 season, what they remembered was, who do they need to call about selling their house?
Mm.
Where were they going to live in Baltimore? Where were their kids going to go to school? How would they go about finding new doctors in a new state? Football was no longer part of that interview. Once we got on the 95 season, it was all about, well, what am I going to do here? And what am I going to do that? That entire season just tanked, going from 3-1. They finished 5-11. Well, since Al Davis had led the way, Modell had the green light from the league to do whatever he wanted with the Browns as far as to relocate or stay where he was.
Mm.
He decided, not a boardroom full of billionaires. When he did announce that they had moved, and then they did move, for a month, they were known as the Baltimore Browns. Did you know that?
Yeah, I know that they had the press conference where they talked about the Browns coming to Baltimore, and then I think that's a interesting part to get into is how did it become the Baltimore Ravens? I know they picked the name through a fan contest, but usually when you move a team, you keep the name, especially when it's Jim
Right.
Brown, all that stuff, like the famous name of the Browns. How did the Browns retain a football team, at least get a football team back in '99? Also, how did they ensure that they would not be the Baltimore Browns? Like, how, was that an agreement by Art Modell, or was he kind of had his hand forced to get to let go of the Browns name there? Because I think that is the most unique thing of all about this move is that the Browns were able to get a new team but still be the Browns. Like we look at the Texans, they're not the Oilers anymore, right? The Tennessee Titans still have all
Right.
that IP. How did the
Yeah.
Browns retain that history and that IP?
Yeah. The Dallas Texans became the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you said, the Oilers and the Titans. Well, for a month they were the Baltimore Browns. In fact, if you go onto YouTube and type in Baltimore Mayor, Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Browns, you'll see the press conference, and the mayor of Baltimore said, called them the Baltimore Browns. There was advertising around the city about Baltimore Browns. Well, what happened was a lawsuit was filed to get a team back, and John Big Dog Thompson, you've seen him. He's the originator of the Dog Pound. He spearheaded that drive to get the Browns back. And what happened was the NFL eventually said, okay, what we're going to do is the Browns are gone. They're gone to Baltimore. We can't get that back, but we will give you an expansion team in 3 years, which would be 1999. In the meantime, Modell was asked about giving up the name, and he did so without hesitation. The colors, the history, the uniform style, the alumni, all of it was given back to Cleveland, which in the history of sports has never ever happened.
Mm.
Uh, the 1996 Baltimore Ravens media guide is like paper thin. It's about, most media guides are about an inch thick. Theirs is just paper thin because they started from zero, almost as if they were an expansion team, but they weren't. They were an existing team that had moved. But Art Modell gave all that up. Uh, to be honest with you, Modell didn't have any issues with giving up the name Browns because him and Paul Brown, which is what the team was named for, had a lot of issues. They didn't get along in the last couple of years. Modell ended up firing Paul Brown. So to disassociate himself with the name Browns, he didn't have an issue with it, and it made sense for him to just go on with it, and he gave it up willingly. The team ended up having a name the team contest. Modell whittled it down to three names, and then he picked one of the three, which was Ravens, which had to do with Edgar Allan Poe doing a poem called The Raven, and that's where that name came from. But the colors were new, everything was new. When the Ravens won their first Super Bowl, there were only three former Browns still on that team. And I told you I interviewed Matt Stover. He was one of those. He was the kicker for the Browns, and he was kicker for the Ravens all those years, and ended up going into their Ring of Honor. So there was really very little Cleveland influence on the. A lot of people have said, well, that was the Browns Super Bowl. Well, there are only three players left, so I disagree with that. Uh, Honestly, the move to Baltimore made Modell a lot of money. He was hemorrhaging money in Cleveland, especially with Stadium Corp. The stadium was falling apart. The city of Cleveland was not building a new stadium. It didn't look like it. He had been losing a lot of money in Cleveland. Ironically, what made Modell decide to move was not getting a stadium in a timely fashion. Now, once the Browns moved, Cleveland received a loan from the NFL to help with the cost, and they built a new stadium. So, Quincy, I got a question for you. If Modell had gotten a new state, if the city of Cleveland had built a new stadium before the Browns moved, would Modell had simply passed on Baltimore's proposal?
I would think the way it's been presented, the answer would be yes. But with our Modell, you never know. So, what do you think?
Well, I do know this. The situation of the Browns moving to Baltimore in the way they did, it changed the NFL.
Mm,
In the coming years, 12 other franchises used the Browns situation to benefit themselves in either getting a new stadium deal or got renovations to their stadium, or they got a brand new stadium. Look at Minnesota. Chicago's building one. Buffalo's building a new one. The team simply used the fact that there were other cities willing to accommodate their needs with public funding, and they used Cleveland as an example of, well, if I don't get what I want, I'll just move the team to Sacramento, or I'll just
mm.
move it to San Antonio or Memphis. They want an NFL team. As far as the Browns go, though, Quincy, they had a horrible 1995 season, ended up 5-11. Belichick did not accompany the Browns to Baltimore as Modell fired him, which, if you think about it, was a good thing. In fact, it was a very good thing. The success Belichick had in New England would have been the success he had with the Ravens in the same division as the new Browns.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting there. Why do you think the NFL was willing to give a loan to the city of Cleveland to build a new stadium? Like, did the NFL have a vested interest in there being a team in Cleveland? Because it seems like the thing that, because I was born in '95, so I did not go through this, right? And the thing
Yeah, yeah,
that I think it's hard for a lot of people who did not go through this to understand, and I'm still trying to figure out, is the Browns got moved, and then it seems like, I mean, like 4 years, right? Getting a team back by the '99 season and losing them in the '95, that is a quick turnaround for what is
yeah.
essentially an expansion team. Why was that turnaround so fast? And like, I've heard all kind of conspiracy theories about like, oh, it was actually like Alfred Lerner who was trying to like maneuver this into getting his own team or like force his way. Why was that period of time so brief? Because I mean, we see teams like the Seattle Supersonics, they lose their team. People assume they're going to get a team back. And it's been almost 30 years, right? Since,
Yeah.
well, 20 years since they've had a basketball team. Why was that gap? It felt like almost immediately the league went and made moves that, hey, the Browns are going to have a team back in Cleveland.
Yeah. Well, and then they ended up giving an expansion team to Houston because when the Browns came in, the league had an odd number of teams, 31, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just problematic. And so they immediately went into an expansion seeking mode for other cities. And of course, Houston was chosen because Houston lost the Oilers. And then that became an even number of teams, which is what we have today, which is 32 teams. But getting back to your funding thing, the NFL has helped a lot of stadiums. They've had a lot of stadiums. When Houston moved to Nashville, they were building a new stadium. The NFL gave a loan to Nashville Stadium.
Mm.
It's a loan now. It's not a gift, but there have been other stadiums like SoFi in Los Angeles, MetLife Stadium in New Jersey for the Giants and the Jets. All of those got loans from the NFL to help them build that stadium, along with some with public funding, um, some with private funding, some with both. But it started with the NFL saying, "Here, we're going to give you $20 million to start, or 50 million, or whatever." Jacksonville's got approved for a $1.4 billion stadium of the future. They're going to get a loan from the NFL to help them kickstart that, and then they'll have their own uh, funding. So the NFL has done this. Now, did they start with the Browns I don't know. I don't know if they gave money to another stadium prior to the Browns, but to get the Browns, there was no way to get enough money that quick in
Hmm.
3 years if the NFL didn't give them, a start loan to begin with.
Yeah, and I guess my question is why Cleveland specifically to get their team back so quickly? Like the was this because the NFL wanted a team in Cleveland, so to maintain a team in Cleveland once he moved the team to Baltimore, and they immediately want to make sure that they don't lose that market, or was this something else behind the scenes that kind of got maneuvered, and the Browns just ended up benefiting from that in order to get their team back so fast?
No, they had a lot. Cleveland had a lawsuit, and like I said, it
Mm.
started with John Big Dog Thompson. He went in front of the Congress to talk about that. When the Browns signed the lawsuit, and then Modell agreed to give up the name and the colors and the uniform and all that. So that would have been in Cleveland anyway. The NFL stepped in and said, all right, here's what we'll do instead is we can't get you the Ravens back, but we
Mm.
can put an expansion team in because at the time the NFL was 30 teams
Okay.
and they hadn't expanded since 1995, excuse me, 94, when they Charlotte and Jacksonville came into the league. So the lawsuit is what kickstarted all that off, and the NFL's remedy was to say, okay, we'll put a team in Cleveland, and then they decided to go after a 32nd city and found Houston. So the
Hmm.
lawsuit is what the NFL. If they had never found a lawsuit, the NFL might be 30 teams today.
That's interesting. Is that the most successful like lawsuit of that kind that's happened? Because I know that the similar lawsuit happened with
I'd have to say
go ahead.
I'd have to say Al Davis is when he sued the league and got
Mm-hmm.
$50 million. That's probably the most successful lawsuit. I mean,
Mm.
you think about it. He is a member of a 30 team league. He's got 29 partnership groups and himself. He sued his other partners, all
Yeah.
29 of them. That's pretty ballsy.
Yeah. So uh it's a super interesting history there with the Cleveland Browns. And then you look at today. And I think one of the things younger fans my age and younger probably aren't as appreciative of is when fans who went through 95, from what
Yeah,
you say, hear about new stadium. To us,
yeah.
that's something we've never experienced. Oh, the Browns owner wants to build a new stadium. That's not something we've gone through. But to older fans, I can reckon that this is something that, depending on how old you are, you've been through one time or two times, and it didn't end well. Do you think the same fears are warranted, or do you think this is just a completely different league where it wouldn't be able to happen, where Jimmy could just get so fed up with the stadium situation, or the city would be so hard up on the stadium situation that Jimmy would eventually move the team because of like what they're going through now with the whole Brook Park thing?
Well, let's look at the NFL itself. How many teams are actually in the city that they're named for? Like the Philadelphia Eagles, their stadium is in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
but the Giants play in New Jersey.
Yes.
The
So
Jets
the
play in New
Jets,
Jersey.
Santa Clara
New
for the
England,
49ers.
New England doesn't play in Boston.
Yep.
Dallas plays in Arlington. San Francisco's stadium is an hour from San Francisco in Santa Clara.
Yeah.
Uh, the Raiders play in Paradise. Miami Dolphins play in Miami Gardens. So the list just goes on and on and on. Uh, the Arizona Cardinals don't play in Phoenix.
They play in Glendale.
Yeah, the list goes on and on about teams that don't actually play in the city that they're named for. Which you take like the Dallas Cowboys. They bought all this farmland outside It's near the interstate. It's got plenty of parking, and I think that's what the Haslams are looking for. They'll build their own little city out there in Brook Park. They'll build hotels, they'll build shops, they'll build restaurants, and the beauty about that is somebody that flies in to watch a Browns game. It's right by Brook Park is right by the airport. So when you fly in, you take a shuttle. It takes you to your hotel, which is on the complex of the new stadium. You stay there. You entertain, Friday and Saturday. Then you walk to the stadium. Then you walk back. Then you take a shuttle and you get on there. All that's great. You don't have to deal with traffic. You don't have to deal with parking. You don't have to rent a car. All of it is right there, and it's all self-contained. By building in Brook Park, what the Haslams do is they've put 1 million parking spots. Where do you park when you go to the stadium?
I
It's
usually park in some like garage, or I just take the train.
yeah, yeah. It's I stay at a hotel that's in walking distance of the stadium. I park underneath in a car park, but they charge me $20 a day, to park my car, and and there's no way I'm going to drive around downtown with all the traffic and all that, especially on game day. It's a nightmare. And with Brook Park, it's right off the interstate, so they'll have several exits. So you'll get off easy, you'll get back on easy. You can go north, south, east, west, real easy. Parking's not a problem. They'll have hotels, they'll have restaurants. All the partying will be done there at the stadium. Um, and plus, if they build a dome, you know what the stadium is like in December with the wind coming
Hmm.
off Lake Erie. It's brutal
Hmm. My
sitting in a stand.
question
You know,
I have thought about, right? Because you brought up the whole
all right.
Arlington model where Jerry Jones brought
Yeah.
up all Atlanta. Now that's also where the Rangers play. I think that was always where the
Right.
Rangers played, by like, right? Because they were
Uh,
always in Arlington. So I wonder, like, is part of why the city is fighting this so hard because they're worried not as much about losing the Browns from downtown Cleveland, but like, will this be something that they could use to attract the Guardians to Brook Park, or like the I don't think it would make any sense for like the it's so many names for the arena: Gund Arena, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. But do they fear that this would be a domino effect of venues leaving downtown? Because a lot of the downtown economy is kind of rotated around those venues being there,
Oh
and
yeah.
bringing people in. So is that why they really seem to be publicly pushing for the stadium to stay in downtown Cleveland? But even then, they're being pretty clear about it's going to be an open air stadium if they stay there. So I don't know how willing the Haslam's are going to really be to do that. Like, is the domino effect what they're worried about, or is it really just they're that worried about the Browns because it's going to affect the economy down there that much?
Well, I don't know the definitive answer to your question, but me personally, I think the Guardians and the Cavaliers are safe.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we're talking about 30 years down the road when those arenas start to deteriorate and need new things. Because you think about it, when Municipal Stadium was built in 1931, there was no internet. There was no skyboxes there. I've been to a football game in Mississippi State, and you go into the men's room, and, and the urinal is a trough that is dug into the wall, and you sit
Yeah,
there and piss against the wall into this trough.
it's
And that was
gross.
built in the 40s. So, there's 30 years from now, what are the new technologies that all these stadiums are going to want and need? We don't know the answer to that. So let's just say that the Guardians and the Cavaliers are safe where they are, and there's no repercussions of them ever moving to Brook Park. Um, but by being in downtown Cleveland, see, you've got restaurants leading up to it. When I fly in for a Browns game, I come on a Friday. I'll eat the restaurants downtown. I'm in a hotel, which was $179 a night. Now it's $479 a
Oof.
night that I have to pay. So, all the hotels benefit, taxis benefit, Ubers, all that kind of transportation. Everything benefits for it to be downtown. If the Browns leave, now they're faced with having to tear the stadium down, probably. So you're going to have that cost. Now you got to figure out what to do with it. It's not going to make money, I would think. They're probably going to build some kind of open air, green space instead, because it's right along the water, and you would need something like that. So it's everything points to it being beneficial to be in downtown Cleveland, and when it's somewhere else, then you've got a huge void there. They've been downtown Cleveland since 1946. The
Hmm.
stadium has been there since
Hmm.
1931. So they've always had that. You've got parking that you can gain money, vendors gain money, everybody gains money. But when they move somewhere else, nobody makes money.
It's interesting. It's an interesting way to think
Plus,
about it.
Interesting. It's
what's
interesting way.
what's the what's the taxes on the stadium every year? They're paying taxes on it, so they would lose all that too.
Mhm. So you said you had an idiom that you wanted to unleash on me, a football idiom. Could you care to
I
expand
did.
on?
Okay, an idiom is something that you say, but it means something totally opposite. Like if I tell you, hey, let's get the self. Instead of me
Mhm.
saying, hey, you're ahead of yourself, I say, hey, don't put the cart before the horse, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what an idiom is. Football's full of idioms. Why is it called red zone? Why is it called a sack? Why is it called? Why are the coaches called coaches? Where did 12th man come from? All of these are football idioms. But since we're at the very end of training camp, I'm going to give you what's called the Turk. The cuts are going to come this weekend or by Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and the Turk is first and foremost this weekend. Well, on any cut down day in professional football, regardless of which league, the Turk is the term used for the person, which is usually an assistant coach, who comes and knocks on your door, and then they tell you, coach wants to see you, bring your playbook. Well, that
Mm.
means you're about to be released. This was coined in 1949 by Don Paul, who was a Los Angeles Rams linebacker. And each year he would say, the Turk always strikes at night. Well, where Don Paul got that from, he was a historian and loved Mediterranean war stories and all that. In the 12th to the 16th century, the Turkish army used a sword called a scimitar and made most of their raids and attacks after dark. Well,
Hmm.
as was the Rams' custom, the cuts were done in the evening on cut down day.
That's that's super interesting. Thank you for that, man. Appreciate you for
Yeah.
coming on,
Oh,
Barry.
one other thing, Quincy. That's also where we get the word cuts from.
Really?
Yep.
Huh? Did not know that. It's a that is interesting. That is very very interesting. Thank you for coming on, Barry. Where can people find more of your work if they're interested in checking it out?
Oh, yeah, I am a staff writer at dogsbynature.com. That's DAWGS by nature.com. We've got some real talented writers. We've got a lot of writers, and we're on it. When Pierre Strong got hurt the other day, I mean, within hours, we had a story up about what happened. It's like today we got a story up about Chris Williams being traded to the Bears. A couple of he that's been done today. The defensive tackle that was having a good camp. A couple of days ago, Cade York got traded. We're on those stories, but it's dogsbynature.com. I enjoyed myself.
Definitely, man. Enjoyed the learning. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from this video. Appreciate you, Barry. Everybody else watching at home, appreciate y'all. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.